racing's king of speed, Kenny Bernstein.
I'm the worst loser you'll ever meet. I'm plenty irate when we lose, and I'm really irate if I mess up as a driver. But that's part of it. But you show me someone that enjoys losing, I'll show you someone that's never won. It's that simple. Because when you win and you get that taste and it's in your blood, then you don't want anything else but that. So you work hard to achieve that feeling again.
Why the vigorous pursuit of speed? Well, speed is what first brought hot rodders to California's dry lakes. A pristine opportunity to test the outside envelope of their mechanical abilities. That hot rodders hobby grew into a nationwide sport, fueled by drag racing's thrilling one-on-one competition, winner take all. Drag racing has matured into a major American motorsport. Drivers and crew chiefs are superstars, but the bottom line is still the top end. Speed. Competitors have chased magic numbers. 170, 200, the next threshold, 250, 290, the next great barrier, 300, 320. These speed goals are woven into the mythology of NHRA Championship drag racing. And the first racers to break the barriers have become legends of the sport. As the 1992 NHRA Championship drag racing season began, everyone was talking about the assault of 300 miles per hour, calling it the last great barrier, racing's final major threshold. Nobody said it, nobody needed to, everyone knew. The first heat to 300 would enter the record books of legend, even if all they ever accomplished was that one magic run.
300's the magical number, everybody liked to do it. You can see the speeds have gone up. I mean, 290 is getting to be common. You know, the Snake ran 296 testing up in Bakersfield. I think it's going to happen, but not for 6, 8, 10 months.
I think the way that Kenny Bernstein's car runs mile an hour, I think that he could do it. They ran real fast early on last year and at the latter part of last year, so I think they're definitely top contender.
It's just going to take a good track like we got here at Pomona and some good air. And we're going to get it. Either us or Amato or Austin or one of the cars are going to click that 300. But things just have to be right, and they're just not right yet.
The guys, Dale, Mike, all the guys, everyone, Charlie, Keith, Fletcher, all of them, Dave Scott, worked the whole winter to try to achieve running 300. Every time they put a piece on the car, they said, is this too much weight? Is this going to hurt us? I mean, they really took into consideration, and Wes Cerny, of course, was a big part of that at that year in '92 also. And they put everything they could to making that car go 300. It was a goal that we wanted to try to achieve. I can't even believe it. I just can't believe this. Holy cow. Would you believe I told you I wasn't sure it was a very good run?
We just kept working hard towards it, but I kept thinking that, boy, it's going to be such a magical day when you stand on the starting line, whoever does it, and you look up at that scoreboard and the first number comes up a 3 instead of a 2, which we had been looking at for the last, 15 years. And it was just a very magical day when we were standing there on the starting line at Gainesville and that 300 came up. In fact, I didn't even see it. I just saw the good ET and turned around and I started walking to the car when I heard this tremendous roar in the crowd, and 300 jumped into my head, but I was scared to turn around to see if it was 300 because there was something big had happened, and I was hoping it was 300, and I turned around, and by then the guys had jumped on me, and 300, you know, it was terrific. It was probably the high point of anything I had accomplished, including world championships.
all fell together. I mean, basically, the racer side was first because you wanted to be the first and the first team to accomplish that. I mean, that was a major goal, a milestone, as 200 was. It's something that, but I don't think any of us knew what value it was, not only in the merchandising marketing side of it, but also in what was accomplished until you do those things. I don't think any of us thought too much about it other than being the first to do it. We had no idea that it would send a shot around the world that it did. None of us could have realized that, I don't think.
In 1994, Kenny Bernstein scored one of motorsport's most impressive firsts. The first car owner to win victories in all three major American auto racing series, NHRA, NASCAR, and IndyCar. For Kenny, his rise to captain of motorsports began simply enough as a sock salesman in his father's department store in Lubbock, Texas. In high school, his competitive nature found release in sports. Football, baseball, basketball, and like any teen, Kenny was drawn to cars and, naturally enough, racing.
I never really had a thought direction at that age of my life that this is what I'm going to do and what I'm going to be. I knew what I liked. I think that's what it boiled down to. I knew what I enjoyed. I enjoyed athletics, I enjoyed competition, and I certainly enjoyed cars at that stage of my life, 17, 18 years old. But I don't think I ever looked at it and said, this is the way I'm going to make a living. No, I think later, when I was 18 or 19, 20 years old, then I looked at it a little differently and said, boy, I'd sure like to do this for a living, but in those days, that was very difficult to do. We raced as hobbies in those days. Those were weekend warriors, as we called ourselves, and we worked during the week or went to school and raced on the weekends.
But it's the dream of every person who races to make a living behind the wheel. The reality in the early 60s was that few were able to survive strictly racing, and those that did so as touring professionals. For enterprising Kenny Bernstein, the next best thing was a job that paid his bills, but still allowed him to compete on the Texas Pro Fuel circuit.
When I was about 23 years old, I had a territory, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Mississippi, and that was my territory that I traveled. Well, it just so happens it corresponded in most cases with my racing too. And I was selling ladies' ready-to-wear in those days. In fact, a sports line called Manhasset Casuals, which were stretch pants in those days. And it was a hot line, and it kept me plenty busy, made me a lot of money. But I would coordinate my travels to where I was racing on the weekend. If I happened to be racing in Amarillo, Texas, for instance, I would go in that area of the country, West Texas, and spend the whole week selling, and to be on the weekend in Amarillo to race. And then Monday morning, I'd pick up again and take off and go to the next area. So I kind of coordinated those two to make them work. And it wasn't a bad life. It was pretty good because at 23, 24, 5 years old, it gave you a little bit of money. You got to go racing and did a lot of traveling.
Now, some may not like to hear this, but drag racing circa 1965 was primitive. Tracks were sprouting up like mushrooms. Competitors and officials were just coming to terms with safety at 200 miles per hour, and even top field racers retained a sense of run what you brung. For a racer with dreams of glory, it was the perfect training ground.
Well, the biggest memory I always remember is when you had to sit over the rear end. You put your legs over the rear end to get to the clutch and to the accelerator, and your bottom was stuck into the back of the third member, and that was always pretty intimidating to me. I could see that baby tearing somebody apart pretty badly, and that wasn't always a lot of fun. And that's the first thing you always looked at. Then you always sat in those cars real low, so you couldn't see out of them. The motor was so gigantic you couldn't see, so you had to look around them a lot of times, and that was hard to do. And then, of course, smoking the tires. We smoked the tires then from the starting line to the finish line. So you were just engulfed in smoke. You couldn't see anything where you were going. They blew oil out of them all the time, covered you up. I mean, I used to have rags tied on the back of my gloves to wipe the oil from your goggles as you're going down the racetrack. And that's the way we raced in those days. That's what it was all about.
Kenny likes to characterize his success as luck. Well, in 1973, Kenny made national headlines with a runner-up in funny car at the NHRA Winter Nationals. Later that year, his heart set on racing. Kenny headed to the West Coast to see about a full-time ride. He stopped in Lubbock to visit some friends and had an idea for a new business. And the next day signed a lease for the first Chelsea Street pub, which would ultimately be 17 restaurant. Never made it to California, and in fact dropped out of racing for 5 years.
When the restaurant deal started, it became so involved and so much work and so many hours in the day that you had no time for anything else, even to think about anything else. So when I made that decision to do the restaurant, I put everything I had, 100% of my body and mind, into that. And I was so busy with that for 7 years that I never even once thought or gave a thought to racing.
The racing bug is a lot like malaria. You never really get over it. In mid-1978, Kenny Bernstein gave in to the bug and returned to a much maturer drag racing. The 1978 R.J. Reynolds and NHRA created the Winston Championship. Major sponsors were noticing the sport's demographics, and television coverage brought many fans their first taste of racing. Professionalism was overtaking the sport. Cars no longer looked like they'd been built in someone's front yard. Crews wore uniforms, and 18-wheelers were the preferred mode of transport between races. It took less than a year for Kenny and his crew chief, racer Leroy Goldstein, to make their mark on the sport at the rain-delayed 79 NHRA Cajun Nationals.
As a kid growing up, you had been going to these things off and on for a long time, and you'd seen all the stars of the sports doing it, and you wished you could, but you never had the opportunity to really compete, and that was the first one we won. So it meant a lot to me. It still does to this day. It was tarnished a little because it was on a Wednesday night instead of a Sunday afternoon because of the rain out, but it was still a win. And we beat a guy in the final that was enjoyable to beat in those days, John Force, who's now the star of funny car racing.
When Kenny returned to racing, he made two decisions. One was to run the best equipment possible, working with the best people he could find. The other decision was to find a major sponsor. Working with Austin-based Budweiser wholesaler Dan Brown and his general manager Bill Williams, Kenny started a campaign to bring the beer giant to drag racing. Easy to think of, hard to accomplish.
At that time, it looked like it was not going to probably happen. It was starting to kind of fade away. And so Dan told me, he says, I don't know what else we can do. We're just about at the end of the road. So I said, I understand. This is about in May, if I'm not mistaken, and close to around the Cajun National Time. So I made a call up there one last time to St. Louis and said to the gentleman in charge, I said, Mr. McDonough, I said, I need 5 minutes of your time. Give me 5 more minutes to try to sell you on this program. And I said, and then I won't bother you again, because we'd pretty much beat him up as much as we possibly could. And Jack says, well, you've got 5 minutes, Kenny, and that's what you've got. So come on up here if you want to. So I had never told him what I was going to do. We're supposed to race on Sunday that weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and as the Cajuns, as you know, got rained out, my meeting was set for Tuesday morning in St. Louis, but I had not told them I was going to bring the entire rig to St. Louis. They had never seen it, so they really didn't know what we were talking about. We were talking through pictures and things like this, and so I said, the only way I can see I'm going to get somewhere is for them to see the investment that I've already made in this program and what we really are, because their conception of drag racing is obviously not what we are. So anyway, we packed up all our stuff after the rain out on Sunday afternoon and smoked all the way to St. Louis. Got there sometime Monday afternoon, cleaned everything up, set up a display, and no one had even done displays in those days, in the parking lot right in front of the building where everyone walks in. And everyone had to walk past our display to get in the building if you came from this side. If you came from the other side, which the executives did, then you didn't have to. Well, about 8:30, I was upstairs for my meeting, and I said, Jack, look out the window here. And he looked out the window. We're on the 4th floor, and there was the display, and there was 400 or 500 people around it. And he said, man, I didn't know you were going to do this. He said, look at all those people. He said, well, let's go down there and take a look at this, because he had never seen anything like it. And he grabbed 2 or 3 of his lieutenants, so to speak, and we went down, and that 5-minute meeting turned into a couple of hours, because they spent a good hour down there looking at everything, getting explained to them what a funny car was, how the body went up and down, and all the procedures that we had done, because they really didn't have any idea. And from that day on, it was pretty much given that it had hooked them into it, that they could see that this was really something good for them. They had all the demographics and everything, but they finally got to see the equipment in person firsthand, which they had never seen before. Could never get them to a racetrack to come and watch it, so I had to take it to them.